What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, October 8th, 2020. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot to talk about today. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. And we're going to do news until we run out of news. And then we will open up the phone lines for your comments, questions, observations, and opinions. The big news right now, hurricane watches have been posted for High Island, Texas, all the way to Grand Isle, Louisiana. Hurricane Delta is predicted to strike the Gulf Coast tomorrow. The outer edges of the storm are already making landfall here. It's currently a Cat 2, but it's still over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and they're expecting to hit possibly Cat 3 by the time it comes on shore, which is a little bit less than they had been prognosticating a while back when they were talking about it being a Cat 4. So a little bit of good news for those poor beleaguered people along the Gulf Coast there, because, I mean, they've had so many storms this season, and they're just coming and coming and coming, and we still got a few more months left in hurricane season. So all you hunters out there, shoot the hurricane as it comes on by. So Louisiana is bracing for Hurricane Delta. They're still predicting Cat 3 by the time it hits the land. And Trump is out there saying people need to be prepared, be careful, and be safe. And it's going to hit the coast tomorrow night. And then 2 days later, we're going to get the remnants of it right here in Indiana here. Now, the other big news, of course, was last night was the vice presidential debate between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. And depending upon who you ask, you get different answers as to who won it. Obviously, Democrats and liberals think that Kamala Harris was wonderful. Republicans think that Mike Pence did very, very well. But it tends to be leaning more toward Mike Pence. There's a YouTube video out we linked to on how Mike Pence scored an all-points victory. And then we're looking at this other article that came out of Zero Hedge, where Pence trounces gaffe machine Harris. And part of the problem was that Kamala Harris basically came out with some statements that were not true, to put it gently and delicately and politely. And so Harris faced off across this 12-foot space of potentially deadly air and plexiglass against Mike Pence, with USA Today's Susan Page as a moderator at the University of Utah. And ahead of the debate, despite media's constant crowing about Biden's double-digit lead in national polls, Trump is actually slightly outperforming against Biden relative to Hillary in the battleground states. Now, remember, we've already established that the corporate media is getting numbers that they want to show you, not what is really reflective of the American voter. And they do that by the very simple mechanism of oversampling among Democrats. They will ask, for example, 60 Democrats who you're going to vote for in November, as opposed to asking 40 Republicans. And so they'll convert those to percentages, and they'll get the numbers that they want you to believe in. But remember, back in 2016, the corporate media was out there saying Hillary's going to win in a landslide. She's so far ahead of Trump. It's just absolutely amazing. Now, this time they're being a little bit closer, so that if Trump does pull off a re-election victory, they won't look quite so foolish as they did in 2016, but they're still going to look foolish here. Now, if Joe Biden steals this next election and is unable to serve a full term, which seems likely given the signs of deterioration, Kamala Harris could become president of the most powerful nation on earth, largely on her ability to lie convincingly. And apparently, during last night's debate, Harris told fib after fib with scarcely a blink and got little pushback from Mike Pence. This is coming out of an article in Russia Today. So in the end, she walked off relatively unscathed and won praise from her adoring corporate media, which has always loved her more than they love the voters. Now, her first deception came when she feigned outrage over last month's New York Times non-bombshell about President Donald Trump's tax returns. Remember when that one came on out and they were looking for signs that he was cheating and that he had connections with Russia, none of which were there. And it basically came on out that Trump's tax attorneys had followed the law. They had used every little loophole that is legally allowed to keep his taxes down. And so there was nothing illegal about what he did. It looks bad when a man with that much money doesn't pay taxes. But again, they were trying to find somewhere where he actually cheated the tax system or he had connection with Russia. They didn't find it. But Kamala Harris was out there trying to exploit that. They're still out there with that canard about how Donald Trump recommended injecting bleach to deal with coronavirus. That was fake news. And a lot of people caught Kamala Harris on this. There was no fact-checking going on here. Another YouTube video from Sean Hannity, Kamala Harris' cringeworthy debate was packed with lies. Now, Kamala Harris at one point was heaping praise on the Black Lives Matter movement and said she was part of these peaceful protests at the same time that riots were breaking out over in Wisconsin, looting shops and brandishing guns at police. Now, the latest riot was sparked in response to the non-indictment of a black police officer who shot a black suspect who reportedly first shot a gun at the officer. But apparently little details like that no longer matter to Black Lives Matter. You're not allowed to kill a black criminal or we will come to your town and trash your Starbucks. Now, Mike Pence asked Kamala Harris whether she and Biden would pack the court if they won. She refused to answer the question, and Pence made a point of saying, I want it noted she refused to answer the question here. And she tried to dodge the issue by bringing up the idea that Donald Trump and Mike Pence have been packing the court system with white judges, that there weren't enough black and Hispanic judges. And that was how she dodged the question about packing the Supreme Court. And there was an interview on Fox News earlier today where they were talking about this idea of packing the Supreme Court and what a dangerous escalation it could start. Because once that principle was established, every time either party came into power, they could add more judges to the Supreme Court and fill them in order to gain a majority on the bench. And you do that long enough, you're going to have 562 judges on the Supreme Court bench, which kind of makes being a Supreme Court justice a little less impressive. Anyway, we ran our own poll on who won the vice presidential debate, and 92% of the votes said Mike Pence won, and 8% said Kamala Harris won. So those are the numbers from the whatreallyhappened.com readers. Now, as for Joe Biden himself, he is out there strongly supporting statehood for Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia because he knows they'll both be Democratic voters and Democratic representatives to help skew the House of Representatives. And in a speech just last night, he restated it. The problem is at the same time, the governor of Puerto Rico was endorsing President Trump for re-election, right? Now, there's a big stink going on right now over next week's debate, or maybe it's not going to happen until the 22nd. And it all began this morning when the Presidential Debate Commission issued a statement that the next debate would be virtual, with Joe Biden and Donald Trump coming via video from two remote locations and talking to the moderator. And Trump answered back saying that he absolutely would not engage in a virtual debate with Biden because of the possibility he could be cut off. And he says what the public wants to see is a one-on-one debate between Trump and Biden. So he says, I'm not going to do a virtual debate. And at the last word that we had was the commission is rethinking their position. But Biden initially said that he would show up to the virtual debate. Then he also turned around and said that if the debate was virtual and Trump wasn't going to show up, that he was not going to show up and instead would hold a town hall meeting where ordinary, everyday voters, if you believe that, could ask their honest, serious questions, if you believe that, for him to answer. And we know in these town halls, they'll pre-select the voters who are going to be called on, and they'll hand them little scripts as to what questions to ask so that Joe Biden can read the answers off the teleprompter here. Now, Nancy Pelosi is out there saying that tomorrow there's going to be a discussion in Congress about invoking the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from office. Their concern is that some of the medication he's taking for the COVID treatment are affecting his mental health. Now, earlier today, Trump tweeted out that he feels he's completely cured. He's waiting for a negative test. And so it's going back and forth. But Nancy Pelosi was telling reporters on Capitol Hill today, we're going to be talking about the 25th Amendment. She refused to give any more details. It sounds like it's a trial balloon to see if she can get enough people to sign on. Because if you read the 25th Amendment, it takes a lot to invoke it. A lot of people have to sign on to it. And getting that number of people, especially in those positions together, I don't think Pelosi can do it. But, you know, we'll see. At this point, they're desperate here. Of course, that's going to put Mike Pence in the Oval Office. And who knows, maybe Pelosi's plan is to find some way to get rid of Mike Pence, at which point she would become the interim president for the rest of Trump's term. And we're seeing more and more liberals out there talking about President Pelosi. What a great thing that would be. I disagree. You know, we talk about Joe Biden's age and Donald Trump's age. Pelosi has them both beat. All righty, now getting on back to the Russian collusion hoax, more documents have come on out that Obama knew about what Hillary was doing with Russiagate. And apparently documents have surfaced that he was fully briefed and knew about it and apparently thought it was really cool here. Now, for years since the Russian collusion investigation was revealed to be a witch hunt, a lot of political sages speculated that there was no way the FBI and U.S. intelligence agencies could have mounted a counterintelligence operation against the president without the current occupant knowing about it. Well, turns out they were right. Obama knew. Now, there was a memo released last week by Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe about the origins of Russiagate. And the memo made the claim that Hillary Clinton approved the campaign in July of 2016 to try and link Donald Trump to Russia's alleged hacking of the DNC emails to distract from Clinton's own email scandal. And to a degree, it worked. Everybody dropped the question about her email server and what was on it here. So apparently a lot of former intelligence officials spoke out that they were appalled at Ratcliffe's decision to declassify the memo. So the DNI declassified documents showed the claim was not as unverified as these former intelligence officials were saying on the corporate media. In the memo released last week, Ratcliffe said handwritten notes from former CIA Director John Brennan indicated that Brennan President Obama on Clinton's plot. And of course, Tuesday of this week, Ratcliffe declassified all those notes. Now, getting on back to Michael Flynn, the Justice Department is claiming that they accidentally altered a document it filed in court in its ongoing effort to dismiss charges against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. They're claiming that a wayward sticky note that was scanned onto a key piece of evidence, department officials have cited in seeking to abandon the case. The document is a set of undated notes from former FBI agent Peter Strzok summarizing a January 5th, 2017 Oval Office meeting in which President Barack Obama, FBI Director James Comey, and other national security officials discussed Flynn's contact with Russian officials. The scanned sticky note, however, included a date range of January 4th through 5th, 2017. Now, why that would cause a problem, I am not sure. But apparently they're out there trying to cover their bases and say this was a mistake here. All right, Donald Trump has ordered the complete declassification of all Russia hoax documents. He's saying no redactions whatsoever. Trump tweeted out, I have fully authorized the total declassification of any and all documents pertaining to the single greatest political crime in American history, the Russia hoax. Likewise, the Hillary Clinton email scandal, no redactions. So he's basically said that all has to be released. Now, he's authorizing the release and declassification. It remains to be seen if anybody's going to comply with that, because remember, all of these agencies were part of that Russiagate plot. The FBI didn't want to investigate because they were part of it. And over at the CIA, Gina Haspel is still hiding Russiagate documents from the public. And apparently she's trying to run out the clock, hoping that Biden will win in November or succeed in stealing the election. And probably the CIA is going to help him do it, because otherwise Trump is going to get those documents and it's going to embarrass the CIA. And the CIA, like the FBI, has one unwritten rule: never embarrass the agency. So Haspel is hoping Trump will lose in November so that the documents will never see the light of day. Now, there's an interesting article that came on out from Zero Hedge. Americans can no longer afford the luxury of caring if Trump did this or that. And it's saying that many Americans simply don't care anymore what Trump did or did not do. And when it comes to choosing the next president, there are far greater issues than Trump's past. As for the thought of Russia's meddling in the 2016 election, or whether Trump colluded with the Russians, by now, most people seem to have made up their mind. People are either outraged, simply concerned, or taking the attitude this is all a big nothing burger and lies promoted by his enemies. Now, there's polls out there right now saying that to the American voter, the economy is the #1 issue right now. They're hurting out there. The American voter is hurting. And they're very upset over the inability of the government to get together a new stimulus bill for them. And, of course, both parties are pointing fingers at each other, with Trump saying that the Democrats are asking for way too much that's not related to coronavirus and the economy, and the Democrats simply saying, well, Trump is refusing to make a deal with us. And there it sits. Now, supposedly, Trump has approached the Democrats with a simple bill, which is just for the stimulus payments. And Nancy Pelosi came out with a very bizarre statement saying that she's okay with this little bill as long as the big bill is passed with it, which is her way of saying, you know, it's my way or the highway. All right, getting back to politics and corruption here. Story coming out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. Hunter Biden was paid $3.5 million by a Russian oligarch to open doors for her construction business in America. This is when Joe Biden was vice president. Now, Russia's richest woman, Yelena Baturina, has refused to discuss her alleged payment of $3.5 million to Joe Biden's son, Hunter. But her brother, Victor Baturin, has sort of blown the whistle, saying the money was a payment to enter the American market. Funny how the corporate media is not looking at that. All righty. Discarded absentee ballots with votes for President Donald Trump were found by agents of the FBI in Pennsylvania's Luzerne County. Okay, the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District in Philadelphia, David Freed, confirmed that a small number of military ballots were discarded, and investigators have recovered 9 ballots as of the writing. 7 of the 9 absentee ballots recovered were cast for Trump, while the contents of the remaining 2 are unknown after election officials in the county resealed them in envelopes. So a lot of funny stuff going on here. A huge trove of Pennsylvania mail-in ballot applications sent by the Trump campaign were found destroyed in USPS trailers right here in Seymour, Indiana. So the post office is not the trustworthy entity it used to be. All right. Getting on to wokeness and protests and so forth. Apparently, Black Lives Matter is taking their rioting into the suburbs in Wisconsin. They descended into the Wisconsin city of Wauwatosa after a police officer wasn't charged in a shooting that led to the death of 17-year-old Alvin Cole. Cole was killed when he opened fire on officers. And the district attorney's office announced that the officer who shot Cole would not be charged. Okay, we got to take a break here for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And welcome back to our show here. Getting on back to the news. We're talking about the riots in Milwaukee, in the suburb. And apparently the Black Lives Matter rioters smashed the window of homes in the suburb following the black officer cleared in the shooting death of an armed black teen who shot at the police here. So the Black Lives Matter supporters are attacking homes in the suburb, and the violence followed the district attorney's decision that police officer Joseph Mensah was justified when he shot Alvin Cole on February 2nd. After nightfall on Wednesday, demonstrators smashed out storefront windows in Wauwatosa before marching down a residential street and hurling large rocks through the windows of homes. Gosh darn those white supremacists. What can I tell you? Interesting little video surfaced of a cashier working at a Speedway convenience store in Milwaukee that was being looted, and the cashier was handing out bags to the Black Lives Matter looters so they could pillage the store and carry off more material. The business was left in complete catastrophe, according to live streamer Brendan Gutenschwager. Let me try that one more time here. Gutenschwager, who was at the scene. Now, he deleted his tweet with the video of the worker handing out the bags, but it had already gone viral online. Once you put something on the internet, it's pretty much impossible to take it back here. Okay, nearly $170 million in government grants, taxpayer money, has passed through a liberal dark money behemoth that houses and shelters and umbrellas over numerous left-wing groups, including Black Lives Matter, Global Network Foundation. The taxpayer-funded grants were dispersed to groups through the Tides Center, which is based in San Francisco. It's a nonprofit incubator that wealthy liberal donors use to bankroll progressive causes. Now, a number of radical left-wing groups have fallen under the auspices of the Tide Center, which acts as a fiscal sponsor to nonprofits by providing its 501c3 tax and legal status. Now, this is so the groups under its umbrella can avoid registering with the IRS. All right, getting on to COVID-19, and the only thing worse than COVID-19 is Biden 20, according to an email I just got. It turns out the head of White House security, Creed Bailey, has been gravely ill with coronavirus. He's been in the hospital since September. They're starting to speculate that he may be patient zero relative to the White House itself, that he had it, brought it into the White House and gave it to everybody there, because there's some 30-odd staffers. We don't have the exact number, but something like 30, 34 is the last number I heard. Staffers in the White House, including 2 members of the press pool, have come down with COVID-19. So, of course, has the president, but thanks to presidential quality medical care, he seems to be out of that. So the White House has not disclosed Bailey's illness, but was confirmed to Bloomberg News by 4 sources. Polls are showing that 30% of Americans, when they get into this holiday season and they've got Thanksgiving and they've got Christmas to deal with, 30% of Americans are actually going to take their guests' temperature at the door before allowing them in. Now, it may be just a little bit of overkill, but with all the fear-mongering that we have been seeing, I can certainly understand why some people might want to take that little bit of precaution, you know, especially with these little handheld units now that take the temperature without touching you. All righty, Boris Johnson is at it again. He is basically going into Tier 3 lockdowns on Monday up in the northern area, with pubs and restaurants closed. Nicola Sturgeon has announced a 2-week restriction in Scotland. Now, the Prime Minister Johnson has signed off on a new traffic light system of curbs for England after days of bitter wrangling between ministers and scientists, with a swath of the country where infections are surging facing that harshest Tier 3 level. Now, Jane Fonda, definitely political, has been all of her career. Remember Hanoi Jane and everything. Apparently, she has triggered a bit of a backlash here by calling COVID-19 God's gift to the left. Because it might help Joe Biden beat Donald Trump next month. Now, Fonda is 82 years old. It's been a long way since Barbarella. Made the comment during a virtual sit-in with the U.S. Working Families Party. And Fonda said in the clip, "I just think COVID is God's gift to the left," adding, "It's a terrible thing to say." Yes, Jane, it is. And she reasoned the pandemic had ripped the Band-Aid off Trump and shown people what he stands for and what is being done to average people and working people within the country. It looks bad, Jane. What can I tell you? It really does look bad. All righty, over at the New England Journal of Medicine, they are slamming all of our current leadership, Trump included. I'll tell you what, we got to take another break for commercials, and I'll finish the story when we come back. And aloha, welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to the phones to Joe in Tennessee. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. I see Pelosi now has moved on to her next scheme, which is the 25th Amendment.
Yes.
And, it's a very frustrating time for a pro-Trump type person, populist,
yes.
nationalist. But when I see them do things like this, I realize that that is not coming from a position of strength. I mean, that's not the kind of, like, thing that you do if you're holding all the cards and your side is winning. So I think that's a good indication to me that they're
panicking.
Down with they're panicking. Yeah, a lot of what they've been doing lately has been panicking. I mean, with the Black Lives Matter and supporting that kind of, they're like reaching for these radical type tools to try to win this election. And, cheating by mail and all this other stuff. These are all things that they wouldn't be doing unless they knew that they were in for big trouble.
Yes.
And, because if you're going to win, why would you destroy, like, credibility? Because you're going to need that credibility when you regain your power. And the credibility has been really, I mean, I'm very frustrated with the whole FBI, CIA thing because I want to see people go to jail. But then again, as a person that despises what the CIA and the FBI has become, they've done such a good job by not putting these people in jail, has created more discredit upon both the FBI and the CIA. I mean, you put a new director in after getting rid of the absolutely provable corrupt Comey, and what does he do? He covers up for Comey, the institution, and destroys the FBI even further than Comey did. Keeps it going in the loss of, and the same way with the CIA. You get rid of the absolute corrupt Brennan and you put in a Haskell, because that's who's recommended, whether he did it on purpose, because they just get in there and what do? They hide all the evidence, they block the evidence, they move the ball even further. Instead, they had an opportunity, Ray and Haskell, to rehabilitate the FBI and the CIA by coming clean to the American people. But no, did they? No, it just shows.
Well, they're trapped by their own career. They're trapped by their own history. I mean, if they start coming clear on some of the stuff they've done recently, inevitably Americans are going to say, well, what about back then? What about the Black Panther coloring book? What about the framing of James Earl Ray? What about the John F. Kennedy assassination? I mean, these agencies are in a real sense trapped. They can never admit they've lied to the American people, or the whole thing unravels all the way back to the beginning.
Well, that's what we're seeing, actually. We are seeing the unraveling. We are seeing the fact that, you have to educate the average American who's not, the Sean Hannity watcher. At first, they love the FBI. Everybody that watches Sean Hannity, Fox News, big pro-FBI guys. Now, after TikTok and getting a good education on the corruption of the FBI and the CIA, they are total. They actually, you had David Nunes, the head of the Intelligence Committee at one time for the House. Now I guess he's second in command under Schiff because they don't have power, saying that these agencies need to be shut down, the FBI and the CIA. And I'm like, yeah, this is wonderful. And once again, I hear a lot of people calling in, criticizing Trump and all that. But really,
no, I got to put you on hold. Joe, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come back to you after station identification. Welcome back to our show here. And we were talking about this story where the New England Journal of Medicine is basically trashing Trump and America's leaders for their handling over the COVID-19 case. and is basically telling voters to kick them out. Now, they're not endorsing any replacements. They're not endorsing Joe Biden, but they're roundly denouncing the approach of the Trump administration to COVID-19. All right, we're going to start taking phone calls, 800-313-9443, and we're going to start with Stuart in Maine. Hello, Stuart. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? I wanted to raise an issue. You had a caller. I tried to raise this issue on John Stadtmiller's show, but he got a little nervous and had a temper tantrum and threw me off.
Okay.
So that's unfortunate. But the issue was this: you had a caller a few days ago, Mitchell, raised the issue of, is our problem one of an individual or individuals, or is it the system?
Yes.
And I would say the problem is the system. Okay, because small government, which is promoted by what we refer to often as the Patriot movement, small government gets eaten by big capital, by big money. Okay, it's a excuse me for a second. It's you've got two powers pretty much. You've got money and you've got political power. And if you have a small government, it's ripe to be swallowed up by the money power. Now, I maintain that the small government mantra that we hear in the Patriot movement is a big mistake. It's 19th century thinking. It's from an era when they were small producers. You didn't have large enterprises.
Yes.
Now, you could say we could break up the enterprises. Maybe those enterprises are efficient, and it works out better. They would have to be investigated on an individual basis. Okay? The other problem connected with this, as I see it, is that there's this kind of hyper-individualism that we have among, fellow thinkers. I mean, you hear people like Ron Paul and others talk about liberty. Well, liberty to do what? To swallow up the media? To spread glyphosate and GMOs all over the place? To ship the factories to the third world? Sweatshops? You have to decide what is going to be primary, the individual or the nation. And if you say the individual, you end up with a rat race, a materialist society, a society that with short-term thinking. Okay, what's necessary is a nationalist government that will subordinate, the economy to what's in the best interests of the nation. Okay, now this doesn't mean eliminating private property. And people run around talking about, well, what do you want, socialism? No, I don't want socialism. But capitalism isn't the answer, okay? Capitalism is not the only private property system because it ends up being like what I'm talking about, the effect of hyper-individualism, okay? You've got to choose between what's first, the nation or the individual. So what I'm getting at here is an ideology that came about in the last century that nobody seems to understand, and I've even had differences with you about it once in a while when I've called in.
Yes.
And
I can understand why.
Nobody. Right. Okay. And that for those who want to really read about it and study it is fascism. Okay. Fascism is private property, but its primary is not economic. It's defense of national culture. Okay. And that's why Hitler.
I have to disagree with you on that one. I have to disagree with you on that one. In fact, I disagree with several things that you've said here. I think the fact is that as government grows larger, the more dependent it becomes on the financial sector to support itself and to hang on to power. When this nation was started, we had a very small government where the people who were participating in it had their own businesses and their own source of income, and they didn't need to go begging to other businesses for money to campaign with. In fact, it was set up where they had to raise their campaign funds from ordinary citizens, and there were strict limits so that a particular candidate's war chest was a true reflection of their popular support. But I think our history would demonstrate that the larger our central government has become, the more into the pockets of the wealthy it has fallen. Now, as far as what is going to be the center of our political universe, if you remember the history of the Renaissance, prior to that, the attitude of everybody, governments, certainly the church and people, was God was the center of everything. And then because of the Black Plagues, people turned away from God, and the end result was during the Renaissance, there was a reshuffling, and man was seen as the center of the universe, which led to this flowering of science and architecture and art and so forth and so on. Now, in the present circumstance, I think fascism is not necessarily the answer, because under socialism, if you try and make money and you fail, society is taxed to cover the losses, so you stand up and you try all over again. Under fascism, if you try and make money and you lose money, society is taxed to cover those losses for you, but nothing goes back to society. Whereas under socialism, when a business does do well, they're taxed to help support the society around them. Capitalism, of course, is if you make money, you get to keep it. If you lose money, then you're responsible for that loss. Capitalism, as it's practiced today, has become very, very predatory. It's certainly not what capitalism was originally intended to be. And I think, definitely reigning in the power and influence of the large corporations is an absolute must. I think the Citizens United decision was a horrible mistake, because it took the funding of political candidates away from ordinary citizens like you and I and handed it on a silver platter to large multinational corporations.
Well, I would make 2 points to that. One, how are you going to change? First of all, I think my criticism of you on this would be that you frequently confuse oligarchy with fascism. And the second point is, how are you going to change the system by depending on the very people who profit from it? Only by
well, I'm not depending on the very people who profit from it. I'm prognosticating that we're coming up on a crash of entire system, the way the Soviet Union fell apart, and that we, the American people, are going to have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to restart this country. And I would, to be brief, I would say that original Constitution's pretty good, along with the first 13 amendments.
Yeah, but you're starting from we got here because of small government. It led to this.
Yes, and there were, a part of the fault, does lie with the American people who've seen this happening generation after generation and didn't really think about it long enough or figured it's going to be the next generation's problem to deal with. But now it's our problem to deal with.
Mike, and I'll get off, is that, what I would say, same thing I told John before he threw his temper tantrum, is that for 100 years, people who have been saying what you've been saying have not been able to change the system, and I say it's because you don't have a strong government. You have a small government, and it's an anachronism. With that, I thank you for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. Throughout history, we've seen the rise of the theocratic society, which gave way to the nation-state society. And unfortunately, we are seeing the transition to the corporate state society. And I certainly think it's a bad thing for human civilization overall. And maybe it'll fall down, go boom someplace in the near future. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Joe in California. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. I believe it was Bill Clinton who said the era of big government is over. So these Republicans have proven themselves to be hopelessly pathetic. Government's expanded its balloon since George W. Bush, and even under Trump. And you don't hear any objections from the likes of Sean Hannity when it comes to big government and deficits. Only when it was under Democrats. All we heard were stories about Obama's deficits. So just wanted to get that out there.
Traditionally the Democrats have been the tax and spend party, and the Republicans have tried to rein in big government, but they've definitely dropped the ball in the last couple of administrations.
Yeah, Mike, just a couple points, and I just hope you can hold me over if there's a commercial.
No, we got time.
I was disappointed. I think there's too much, once again, there's too much of this attacking the other callers. I heard Miles yesterday or the day before from Maine, and he always has some good things to say. But he just came on and he was critical of that fellow from Tennessee, and then he just hung up. So I hope we hear more from Miles. But he just came on and made that that short criticism and then hung up. So we need to focus on the issues.
I agree, and we're trying to clamp down on the personal rancor among the callers.
Yeah, because I like Miles. Miles and Joe. They always have good things to say. Mike, you heard on the debate last night about Kamala Harris was critical of Trump. The fact that he was a puppet of Putin, and she brought up that story. It's been disproved about the bounties being paid to the Taliban to kill U.S. soldiers. What would Joe Biden do that Trump and the U.S. government hasn't already done to Russia? They've been sanctioned to death. I mean, what are we talking about? Dropping nukes on Moscow? I mean, what else can be done? What would Joe Biden do to show his independence from Putin that Trump hasn't already done?
I can't think of anything. I mean, we're hovering at the edge of a proxy war over in Armenia, Azerbaijan. That whole area could blow up into a regional proxy war where the United States and Russia are pouring in people, and it could be another Syria.
Yeah. And Mike, what do you make of this story about Governor Whitmer? I don't buy it. This story about her being they allegedly arrested 5 or 6 people in a kidnapping plan. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, it's been all over the news, all over the game. Well, a lot of people think the same thing, that it was basically staged to win her some sympathy at a time when most of the voters in her state wish that she and her COVID-19 lockdown decision would go away.
Nailed it. Exactly. It's in order to generate sympathy because she lost that court case in Michigan, and it's been a good sign. You've seen cases in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and now in Spain. They basically slapped down the restrictions in Madrid. So I think the Supreme Court gets even more important, especially if Biden wins. If he imposes nationwide lockdowns, it could go to you could have a case going to the Supreme Court. But I think this Whitmer story is a lot like what happened with Angela Merkel. I don't know if you recall this, and I knew it from the beginning. She had these episodes of shaking in public, which have now stopped. At that time, her popularity was quite low, and she once again these leaders. I don't believe these leaders. Never. They could tell me the time in a room full of clocks. I wouldn't trust them. She comes out and said she has these episodes of shaking publicly. That's supposed to generate sympathy for her among the German people, and now those episodes have stopped. So I don't buy it. I don't believe this Whitmer story. I think it's all a bunch of baloney. I just wanted to get that out there.
Okay. I mean, it's certainly possible. I mean, we get lied to so much.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Dave in Orlando. Hello, Dave. What's on your mind today?
Good afternoon, Mike. I'm on a 50-year-old dial phone plugged into a bounce house jack, so I hope you can hear me okay.
I can. Does it have a rotary dial on it?
Yeah.
Cool. How retro.
I converted it to do touch tone. And anyway, before I get to the point here, this Saturday, October 10th, will be the 30th anniversary of Naira El Sabah Babies Incubators testimony back, got the whole 30 years and going of Iraq War. So, anyway, I just want to preface this. Now, I'm a Canadian. I can't vote. My wife is an American citizen, and I'm trying to convince her to write you in as either sheriff or DA here in Orange County. But what I really want to say is, of all the people that have done this to us, this economic catastrophe over this past 7 months, one of those people telling us to stay locked down or stay home, stay safe, stay locked down. None of those people have missed a meal. None of them have, missed a paycheck. They haven't gone without medication. They don't have destroyed credit. They're not getting calls from bill collectors. I mean, they're not on the precipice of homelessness, and something's got to give here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're seeing the warning signs everywhere, and Ron Paul's running ads on Fox News now about the whole system is going to come apart in the near future, and you'd better be ready for it.
Yeah, well, we have been arming up in my household. That's all I
Yes.
can tell you. I mean, I'm not in a position to start a war here, but it's been pretty safe here in Orlando so far, because back on June 1st, the Orlando police actually fought back against the rioters, and it's been pretty quiet here. So we've been fortunate, but I mean, these masks have to come off, and we have to get back to work.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And Claire and I are still wearing our masks when we go out. We have been all along, more out of a sense of politeness. But now that we've been exposed to COVID-19, we're trying to be careful for, people around us and everything, although we're still not symptomatic. We're going for our test tomorrow, and hopefully it's going to come back negative, and this will all have been for nothing. But as far as the masks are concerned, I keep seeing all these articles out there saying they're really not effective. I know that when I'm wearing a mask and I put on my sunglasses, when I exhale, the sunglasses fog. So obviously what I'm exhaling gets around the mask and flies out into the space around me anyway. So I keep hearing that N95s are the only mask that is going to work against the virus, and yet I don't see any N95 masks out there. It's all these homemade masks, and people are wearing scarves and old bandanas, and so it's politics and public relations more than it is real science.
Well, I lived up in Toronto back in 2003 during the SARS outbreak up there. I worked in public transit, a bus driver, and I was exposed to literally thousands of people. And I never, number one, I never got sick, and number two, all the stuff that's being done here was never done it there. I know you got a break coming. One last thing: eat your cinnamon.
Okay, definitely we're doing that. Dave, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these 2 words. And welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're talking with Joe in Tennessee. And Joe, if you could just pick up where you left off.
Well, I'm very frustrated that there's no indictments and all that. But I have to tell you, as far as like my goal, which is to see the abolishment of the FBI, which is our modern day Gestapo, and our CIA, which is a utterly corrupt, oligarchical power agency to just maintain the oligarchy and our version of the KGB. There's nothing better that Trump really could have done than put a person like Wray or Haskell in, because they are furtherly discrediting the two enemies of the American people, these agencies, more than anything he could have done. If he would have put a reformer in, they could have saved, maybe salvaged their reputation, but now they are so finished. If Trump is reelected, he has set them up for a big fall as far as hopefully he wants to get rid of the FBI. And we don't need an FBI. We don't need a Gestapo to go out there. And I mean, this thing in Michigan is a joke. The fact that they say there's no Antifa. I mean, you had Harris up there quoting the Ray director more than the Democrats quote this guy all the time. This isn't the first time. I think Biden was quoting Ray before about white supremacy and Antifa. And last night, I forgot what they quoted him about. But, does the FBI ever speak out against any of these, like, knowing lies, like the Russia bounty or any of these other things, these talking points? No, it's only to attack the white people in this country and nationalism, populism, and Trump. So I think it's wonderful what's going on, although it is very frustrating because I want to see Frog March and indictments. But I hope that Trump can get reelected and then really clean house. If he's reelected, he will be a type of Caesar, and I think that's probably giving them a lot of discomfort on Capitol Hill. I think the Zionists probably don't like it because they whenever they see like a big leader, unrestrained leader, they think of Hitler, because it's been imprinted in them because they're Jewish people, and that's something they're taught since they're kids. You can't have a nationalist, powerful leader, you'll get a Hitler. So they don't like seeing that. That's probably part of the reason they're very alarmed by Trump, and there seem to be a lot of the people that are behind destroying Trump. But once again, I don't want to sit here and just and act frustrated, because it is frustrating. I mean, I see these people on TV and they talking about, Jim Jordan, and the FBI did this and they did that, and I'm just screaming at the TV like, well, what are you going to do about it? But maybe it's actually going to work in it's more strategic. It's like Sun Tzu or something, Let them destroy themselves.
Well, it's part of the overall erosion of public confidence in the government as a whole. Because people are looking at what the FBI has really turned out to be, what the CIA has really turned out to be, what the NSA has really turned out to be, and they start thinking, well, what about all the other components of government that we were taught in elementary school were lovely, sweet people who had our best interests at their heart? What are they up to that we need to be finding out about? And this is one of the symptoms that I think precedes a Soviet Union-style collapse in this country.
Well, I hate to see the economic things that's going to bring, but we can't go on the way it is. This corruption has to be rooted out of the system, and it's systematic corruption. They talk about systematic racism in this country, which is nonsense. But there is systematic corruption. I mean, this is part of the game. The power players, pull a jujitsu move and have us all talking about systematic racism when they should be talking about systematic corruption, which is universal now in all our institutions. And that's one of the things I love about this Trump presidency. What I want to say about anything else, this systematic corruption is totally being exposed. And it really, you hear like Hannity and these others saying, well, it was just Comey. It's just the FBI agents at the top. Well, it turns out it wasn't just Comey. And it turns out it's Comey's replacement. And it turns out it's all these other people that were worried, taking out insurance because they knew what they were doing was illegal. So, I personally think the FBI needs to be disbanded right away. It's just thoroughly corrupt, and it's too powerful of an institution to be this corrupt. It's got too much power to be so corrupt. And
they blackmail all of our members of Congress. They blackmailed John F. Kennedy. They're probably blackmailing the Supreme Court justices as well. All of Washington, D.C. is this Gordian knot of all of these blackmail connections going back and forth. And at some point, some part of it's going to snap and it's all going to unravel. And the American people are going to get a real wake-up call as to the true nature of the government that has taken root in this country.
Just to look at, isn't it very interesting how the media covers for the FBI too? I mean, it used to be back in the late 60s and 70s, the media had an adversarial relationship with the FBI back with the Nixon era, They exposed the FBI.
Well, not entirely.
To a degree.
At the end of World War II, the intelligence agencies moved to control all the media. The CIA called it Operation Mockingbird. I don't know what the FBI called it. The reason the FBI was held to account in the 60s, in the Nixon era, had to do with the COINTELPRO scandal, where some people broke into an FBI office and they obtained the files about what the FBI was actually doing to stifle free expression and the democratic process. And it was made public, and the corporate media had no choice but to report it because everybody had already heard about it, and they didn't want to be seen as covering up for the FBI. So they ran with it. Congress had hearings. The FBI said, we promise not to do it anymore. And that was the end of it. Of course, the FBI is still playing those games.
Hey, one real quick note about the debate. You hear the Kamala Harris make a point that that Trump hasn't nominated any black judges to the federal bench. Well, the fact of the matter is most black judges aren't conservative. It comes down to that. You have to understand, you can't use that as it's a thing about race. It's really about politics. The fact of the matter is 90% of blacks as judges are going to be very left. They're not going to be constitutionalists. If they were constitutionalists like Clarence Thomas, Trump would put them on in a minute. So it really goes to the fact that black people are very one-sided in their political views. So if it's a Republican president, there are not going to be that many black judges. It's not racist. It's just politics. It's they're their judicial philosophy. And that's what it comes down to. They always got to use this race card. But the fact of the matter is, it's like black women. 98% of black women are Democrats. And they're going to be they're not going to be strict constitutionalists. They're going to be judicial activists. So that's what it's about, Camel. It's not about racism. Anyway, all right, well, thanks. I'll leave you on that note. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Bruce in Texas. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'll try to be quick here. I watched the NBC Morning News, the Today Show.
Yes.
And one of the clues that told me that, trying to discount my own personal opinion, that Pence won the debate because they almost had a news blackout. It was as if there wasn't even a debate last night. I mean, they totally just ignored the fact that there was a debate. I found that pretty interesting.
I'm getting emails saying that the Fly won the debate last night.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a 2 versus 1 debate, actually. I don't know who that moderator was, but she came across as an NPR news host, with her loaded questions. What we do if Trump refuses to concede the election? They threw that at him at the very last debate in 2016. You remember that? Yeah. And then what happened to Pence was right. Pence, he was on the ball on that one, like, well, Hillary didn't concede for 3 years. And then Kamala brought up that losers and suckers, the people who died in the military are losers and suckers, fake quote that hasn't been sourced.
Yeah, but that's already been discredited. Yeah. I mean, the editor of The Atlantic came out and said, no, the sources turned out to be unreliable on that one.
That shows how duplicitous they are. They'll just put something up and then, it gets discredited later, but then they keep repeating it as if it wasn't discredited. I mean, talk about fake news and yeah. And
they're playing to the people who don't get their news from the internet, which is still sadly a majority of the American people. And so, they can be confident standing up there and regurgitating the same lies that they've been using over the last several months, because they realize most of the people actually watching their TV sets don't know that these lies have been exposed in the past.
Yeah, they're shooting for the low info voter, that's for sure.
Yes.
Disavow, Trump wouldn't disavow white supremacists, canard they keep throwing out over and over again. And he came out on Fox News on Hannity and kind of like, he walked the walk for that one. And he act like he didn't ever do that. And I'm kind of disappointed in the RNC or in the campaign for not pushing Antifa down the Democrats' throat, Where you disavow Antifa. And even BLM, bring up BLM, the hell with that. I mean, they're violent. Look what's going on. They're turning our society upside down for criminals who get shot, deserve to be shot so in most cases,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think he won. It's just really frustrating that it looks like an uphill climb in the media and trying to get people to recognize, truth versus the spin,
Okay.
And and I think it was great. I think a great shot that Pence did. He's a really quick thinker. When Harris ran off that list of Bush era GOP establishment people, and he said, "Yeah, that's a good list of the Washington establishment." He could have said deep state, but how about, you could get away with that. Anyhow, that's all I had to add for tonight.
All right. Well, Bruce, thank you very much for the phone call here. And we're going to switch to Al in Canada. Hello, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, most people remember the shocking lie, not
Yes.
the boring truth.
Yes.
Sad. Sensationalism, right?
Well, remember Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf, the bigger a lie is, the more people will believe it.
Yeah. Sanity. Most people, everyone loves a story. You know what, Mike? And the thing is that what it does is it actually gets our imagination going.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then our senses are all of a sudden turned on and we react to that sort of thing. But that's just the way it works.
Yeah, it's a good analysis.
Your first caller was talking about fascism. None of the isms have worked.
Well, somebody just sent me an email saying that socialism can only work in two places, heaven where it's not needed and hell where it's already in existence.
Well, I think any of the isms implemented always leads to one road. And you're always going to have psychopaths that are always going to find ways around things one way or another, and that's what happens.
Yes.
It's always happened that way. It's happened that way throughout history. So I don't pretend to know what's the best way of doing things, but I do know that most people remember the shocking lie and not the boring truth.
Yes.
The truth is there are too many people on this planet.
The shocking lie gets a headline, and then the retraction is always buried on page 27 underneath the obituaries.
Exactly. So, you come up with all this nonsense that, the United States is awash in coal.
Yes.
We have enough coal for 200 or 300 years, I think.
Yes.
And obviously, not everyone, but everyone is led to believe that CO2 is a horrible thing.
Yes.
And of course, coal being very dense, it has a high BTU value per unit, whatever the unit you want to measure it in. So obviously, correspondingly, the other end of the equation, there's going to be a lot more CO2. But CO2 can do a lot of things as well. The problem is that we live in a capitalist society, and only the things that sell and make people rich are allowed to be used.
Yes. Well, the oil industry is very powerful, very large, and they don't want competition from coal. They don't even want competition from nuclear. They want an exclusively oil-based economy for the entire planet because that will maximize their profits. It's possible to have clean power using coal. The technology already exists. But again, it's an economic threat to the established order.
Well, with all these, I don't even know the word to use, alarmists saying that CO2 is a pollutant, and there's no basis for that in reality whatsoever.
Not at all. It's essential to the cycle of life.
Yeah, and it's one of the things. It's once again, it's a shocking lie.
Yes.
And the fact is that CO2 has been 4 times as high as it is right now in the past, and we are coming out of an ice age. It's going to get warmer no matter what. There's not a lot we can do about it. If humanity ceases to exist, it wouldn't matter.
It would matter to me.
Change overnight. Well, I don't want to see it. You know what I mean? Well, I guess no one would, right? You don't want to see it, but you can't see it at the same time.
I would take humanity on a personal level. What can I tell you?
Well, I mean, it's who we are.
Yes, it is.
It is. This morning on the Canadian state-sponsored propaganda website, the CBC. Now they're crying that nitrous oxide is worser than CO2. It's way worse.
Oh, no more Ready Whip.
I used to huff that when I was a kid.
Yeah, I know that was very popular.
Right? Yep, laughing gas we called it. And that's a long time ago, before people even knew about it.
Yes.
But it just goes to show you. So really now, at this point, now they're going after cars, right?
Yes.
Like gasoline engine cars.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with it. But
I don't
Problem I do
either.
have.
You know, in fact, when Claire and I bought our car, we did look for an electric or a hybrid, but we simply couldn't afford it. So we got this Hyundai,
Yeah.
which is actually a very wonderful car, by the way. But of course, out in California, they've now just declared by imperial edict that all gasoline-powered vehicles will be off the road by thus and such a few years down the road, without addressing the issue that the state's electrical system can't even keep up with current demand, let alone what happens when so many million people start plugging in their cars to charge at night.
Exactly. It's almost like they're trying to build an elitist society
Yes.
in California, but the people that are building it aren't elitists.
No.
They're failures in every sense of the
They
word.
don't think these things all the way through. They go for the soundbite that they think is going to impress the most voters or the most backers, and they just go with it. And, you know, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her Green New Deal. And people kept saying, you know, you're talking about $2.5 trillion here. How are you going to pay for it? And she just says, well, we'll just pay for it. Really? How? Oh, we'll just pay for it. She hasn't thought it all the way through. How to make this actually work. You know, it's like when they brought along, ethanol-based fuels, and they said, oh, this is all going to be carbon neutral, and it's going to be wonderful. And it turned out, of course, to be a complete and utter failure. First of all, when it was first introduced, it was ruining the fuel systems of cars that were designed to use gasoline rather than alcohol. Now, of course, newer cars can use either one, which is a good thing. But when you add in the carbon dioxide imprint of processing the plant matter into alcohol, there's a carbon footprint there. And so,
can you hold me over real quick, Mike?
Yeah, I'm going to hold you over here, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about ethanol fuel. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show here, and a friendly reminder and a nudge in the ribs that Republic Broadcasting Network is in the middle of a perpetual fundraiser to basically just keep our equipment working so that we can keep on giving you good information so that you, the voter, can make good choices. So once again, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer, anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you, and I thank you, especially to all of you who've already donated. Thank you very, very much. All right, we're talking with Al in Canada. We were talking about how so many of these liberal ideas are not thought all the way through. We were using ethanol fuels as one example where, because alcohol has less chemical energy than gasoline, you have to buy and burn more of it to accomplish the same amount of work. And there were various other shortcomings as well. So, Al, take it away.
Well, you know, and what is never, ever, ever mentioned with ethanol is it's basically one potato short of blinding white lightning.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
It's booze.
Yes.
And they're selling it for pennies for a gallon, right?
Oh, yeah, but that drinkable booze,
when you go to the liquor store, why is it so expensive?
The taxes.
Yeah. That's what's crazy.
Yep.
And, you know, alcohol burns at a very low temperature and, you know, blah, 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 blah. There's not a lot of energy, not like gasoline, which is, I mean, it's just packed with all those carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms all bundled together. But I think, like, this is only my personal opinion. Now that we're into, like, energy. Solar.
Yes.
Is the only way to go. It's not mechanical. Once you buy it, there's nobody behind it stoking a furnace or anything like that. All you need is light, period.
And batteries for when the light has gone away.
Efficient.
You know, the problem is that solar cell efficiency, there have been recent claims about we found a breakthrough technology to make solar cells more efficient, but for some reason it has not yet reached the consumer level.
Well, that's always what happens, right?
Yes.
That's just the way it is. Because all the money's in the old stuff.
Yes.
And there's another problem right there. It's just money. Money.
Yes.
Or what people use as some form of barter trading system, currency, whatever you want to call it, that is the real root of all the problems of any society. Because, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. That's just the way it is. It's another one of these isms that just doesn't work. And it's, we're fresh out of the trees, Mike. I mean, I've said this before. A lot of people don't realize it because, I don't know, they're too proud or whatever. But as soon as you can look at another person, whoever it is, that you absolutely disagree with, and you're not filled with rage and hatred, I think now we're ready. At that point, now we are ready to, actually talk about what's best for society. Because this finger pointing and checkmating
and calling each other names and this knee-jerk rage, if the person in front of you disagrees with you about anything, that's very destructive of our civilization.
I love disagreements. I love it. I love hearing other people's opinions. And I love hearing why they believe that. What I don't like hearing is the arguing and the name calling. I mean, as soon as you resort to name calling, it's over.
Yes, you've lost the argument.
Yeah, you're done. You're done. But of course, some people react in a positive way to that sort of thing because they kind of feel the same way about, like, they feel a little like that person. So you're in. And it's sad. It's really sad. And, until humanity matures, this is the sort of nonsense that we're going to have to deal with. It's, Mike, I got to wonder, after November 3rd, what's going to happen with these masks.
They're going to go away.
I can't wait. I just can't wait.
No,
Thanks
they're
for
going to
your
go
time,
away.
Mike.
All right, you got it. Thanks an
too.
awful lot for the phone call. And we're going to switch over to David in Boston. Hello, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I'm just getting on a train here.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Well, you're a little muffled here, but go ahead. What's on your mind?
Okay. Mike, and I can put my phone on mute, but then I won't be able to hear you. But Mike,
well, I can hear you. Actually, okay, Dave, I'm going to have to put you on hold because we're up on another commercial break here. So stay on the line. It's a 4-minute break, and I'll be right back to take your phone call. Okay?
Good.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and we are talking with David in Boston, who's on a train. So there's a little bit of background noise. David, are you there?
I'm here. I got off the train, Michael, at a stop.
Okay.
So, hey, listen, I designate the FBI as a terrorist organization. Yeah, you heard it right, FBI. You're a terrorist organization. The other day, I hit some of the high spots like Waco and the Alfred P. Muller Federal Building in Oklahoma and
Ruby Ridge.
Ruby Ridge. Listen, how about Russell Means? How about John Singer, the Mormon man?
Yes.
Out in Utah, huh? And how about Ed and Elizabeth Brown up in New Hampshire, huh?
Yes.
And how about Mark and Nick Begich's dad and Hale Boggs up in Alaska, huh? You bastards are terrorists. You're a terrorist organization. I decree you're a terrorist, and the curse of Jesus Christ abides upon you. And you're not long for this world. You're coming down. We're done with you. We're done with you. You're over and done with, okay? You think I'm bluffing? You're a terrorist organization, and we're not going to put up with you anymore. I could go on and on about all the people you've killed. How about Richard Joe? How about Richard Joe, you bastards? You rotten bastards! You're the scum of the earth. Oh, man, I could go on and on, but I'm telling you, the great Satan is a wicked one. A wicked one.
Well, don't sugarcoat it like that. Tell us how you really feel. David, you still there? Okay, David has dropped. And let's switch over to Miles in Maine. Hello, Miles. Your ears must be burning. You've been talking about you. What's going on?
Well, hello, Michael. I wanted to cover a couple things with you. One, I'll start off with is I think Vice President Pence showed that he's absolutely useless to the Trump ticket last night.
Okay.
He had so many chances to step in to really make Harris look like a hypocrite. And quite honestly, Michael, he didn't do the job that Tulsi Gabbard did on her.
Yes.
Tulsi Gabbard took that task, and that knocked her right out of everything until she resurfaced. But Pence had a chance to really wipe her out, and he just sat back there and did not. He was lifeless. I mean, he looked like a cadaver up there.
Claire had that same observation that, Kamala Harris seemed to always be on the offensive, and, Pence was just sort of hanging back. Now, I don't know, maybe Pence has a distorted sense of being a gentleman, and, because Kamala Harris was a woman, he was going gentle on her. But in politics, you shouldn't do that, especially if you look at some of the women politics has brought us, like Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Michael. But even if you're being a gentleman, you know what? Here's the point. All she did was smile and laugh and cackle. And, my point to her would have been, what's so funny here? We're talking about America. What's so funny here that you're laughing and cackling about everything that's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And, I would have raised quite a few different more issues myself. I mean, and I often think, as it's been postured in the past, but what a Tucker Carlson would have done with her right then and there.
Yes.
And then, Michael, I want to get to another issue here because the caller called in again, and I want to put an end to this myself. He called in and he more or less, he made some good points and things on his call, but then he got around to me. I think he missed that call where that caller from Memphis called me names, which is unprecedented on your show.
Yeah, well, we're trying to basically rein all of that sort of stuff in and stick with the issues here.
Right. Well, we should, but we shouldn't let it be at my expense. I was called
a
name because
don't feel picked on. I mean, there's been a lot of name calling, for a lot of the callers.
But I chose not to debate and argue with somebody because I wanted to make a point about another topic, because that's what I call the show for. So I was called a name by that person who also called another caller a name. So the problem isn't Miles, and it's not the other caller that was called a name. It's the guy who's out here calling the names. And you should have directed it that way, Michael.
Well,
you should have directed it, though. You should have told him. You don't have the right to come on my show and call other callers names. You can contest what they say, but you don't have the right to call them cowards because they choose not to engage in another argument, but rather to ask a question. And that's where you should have come into play. And with that,
you're right, I should have, and that's why we're starting to crack down on all of this now.
Right, but you never put it in his corner that he was wrong. So these guys call in and look like I'm wrong, and the other caller was wrong, and not the guy calling the names was wrong. And that's the problem. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to Mitchell in Memphis. Mitchell, hello. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, my God. What timing.
Yes. Be nice.
Hey, Mike.
I have a drop button, and I'm not afraid to use it.
Right. There. A little humor bit. Mike, let me tell you something. The other caller talked about a couple of points here, just housekeeping. When people talk about overpopulation and climate change, I don't want to have that discussion until we talk about Nikola Tesla.
Yes.
And the banks defunded him, and I guess the military and the government made off with his body of work.
Well,
now,
so
Mike,
did Marconi.
What he was doing in, what was it, Mike, 1910 or 1919 with the Tesla Tower possibly could have solved all of our energy problems.
Well, the reason that was defunded by the banks is the system would be impossible to put a meter on. The idea was it was going to broadcast electricity through the Earth's crust, and anybody could tap into it. And there was no way to basically meter how much they were using and send them a bill. And that's why the idea lost favor with the banks. They didn't realize Tesla's ultimate goal was free electricity for everybody.
Exactly. So we would not have enough. I mean, population is not because there's not enough space on Earth. It's about resources and resource management.
Yes.
Think if you could go out and get energy for your needs as a human being the same way you can go out on a spring day and have enough wind to fly a kite. It's just there. You just have it. Clean, efficient.
Yeah, but the wind is not always there, and neither is the water. When you talk about resource management, I mean, ultimately, if you think about it, increasing the available energy to people is one of the easier problems to solve versus, food supply, water supply, keeping the air clean so people can breathe. Those are proving far more intractable.
But Mike, everything tracks back. The food supply, all these things track back to a need for energy. Think about how much of each dollar is spent on purchasing energy to do drying your hair, the frylators at restaurants, everything goes back to energy. And what if energy could be abundant, free, efficient? I don't know. It'd be a global game changer. But number two, the one ism that we haven't tried is voluntarism. I'm not going to go there. I mentioned Thomas Hobbes every damn phone call. I don't agree with him. Number three, the other day, yesterday, whenever you checked me on it, I meant to say that the vaccine, what did I say? The coronavirus vaccine is dangerous. Maybe what you should do is put some background waterfall music and embed a subliminal message. Why don't you do that, Mike? So everybody's hearing that, the vaccine is bad. The vaccine is bad. Getting to my point.
I think pretty much the audience of this show knows that I'm an anti-vaxxer, and I'm very concerned over the recklessness with which these products are put onto the market and shoved into our arms. And I, for one, am certainly not going to be taking any COVID-19 vaccine for many months after it's introduced to make sure it's not killing a bunch of people like the swine flu vaccine did back in 1976.
That's what I'm saying. A subliminal suggestion. I'm sort of joking around, but there's truth in the jest. I'm just saying I want to keep, and that's why I tried to bring it up yesterday. I just want to keep pushing on this idea that this thing is not tried and true. It's dangerous. I want to keep that in the minds of people. Number three, but I want to say this also real quick before I run out of time. We have this ongoing thing of the bad people, or is it the bad government system? I want to read some. I went to let's go to the bedrock of this system of government. Let's go to the Bill of Rights. I'm at the Bill of Rights Institute. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution make up the Bill of Rights. James Madison wrote the amendments, and here it is, which lists specific prohibitions on government power. Then, in response to calls from several states for greater constitutional protection for individual liberties. Now, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to title this "Crisis of Vague Language." Now, let me run down here and let's go to, for instance, Amendment 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed. And this is what I want to point to. Nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. Now, I'm going to read something real quick if I can. Albert Woodfox, 67 years old, has been in solitary, known in the jargon as closed cell restriction, since April the 18th, 1972. Following a prison riot that resulted in the death of a guard. Apart from a 3-year period in which he was kept among the general population of a parish jail, he has spent every day since then entirely alone in a 6-foot by 8-foot cell with views through metal bars only of the concrete corridor. He is held in the cell for 23 hours a day. In the final hour, he's allowed to shower and walk up and down the corridor, or weather permitting, to have an isolated walk in the exercise yard. Now, this man was released. This isn't something that happened in 1840. This man was released in 2016. So just think about that. 42 years. 42 years in a 6x8. I can't even imagine, and I don't even want to. But real quick, now 33 states have the federal government. Let's see, it says here, now 33 states and the federal government have some form of compensation law for wrongfully convicted.
Yes.
Well, that means, let's switch it around. That means that 17 states do not compensate the innocent. Now this man wasn't innocent, but we're really, I want to bring up this also. What is it called? A remittiture? A remittiture is a ruling by a judge, usually upon a notion to reduce or throw out a jury verdict, lowering the amount of damages granted by a jury. So let's put it all together. Let's go back to Amendment 8. It says, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. And I know that you're going to say, well, those are bad people that made these judgments, or the judges and stuff. But Mike, did Amendment 8, because of vague language, did it leave the door open for bad people to do bad things? And the fact that this is still going on, these people are incarcerated like this. Albert Woodfox is the most egregious example, but there's a lot of examples. So is it the system, or is it just the bad people, or does Amendment 8 need to be tweaked? Does it need more specificity? What do you say, Mike?
It needs people to stand up for it. And I think at some point we have to point the finger at this individual's attorneys who should have appealed that decision, on the basis of it violating the Eighth Amendment.
What I'm saying, the Eighth Amendment says nor cruel and unusual punishment. That's subjective. What does that mean? We need specificity.
Well, I think we'd have to go back to the judge on that one. I think most people certainly would agree that 40 plus years in solitary confinement is cruel and unusual punishment. What they're getting ready to do to Julian Assange, I think, falls under that category.
And so this stuff's, at any rate, one last thing. I want to go up to the Fifth Amendment. The latter part of the Fifth Amendment is eminent domain.
Yes.
I love how they call it eminent domain in 1791 when most of the people didn't know how to read. But nevertheless, the takings clause. And it says, nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now,
correct.
First of all, once again, we get to the vagaries. I could tear this down word by word, but we get to the vagaries of what is just compensation. And what has been determined, the state determines the compensation. We, the individuals who are having our property taken, do not get to determine. There is a thing called subjective valuation, but they're still talking about that. You'll get what's called fair market value. And I wanted to ask you something. So the state's going to say you're going to get fair market value, what we offer you. So let's say you get X amount of, it's going to be monetary value, and so the state's going to give you money.
Yes.
Well, they're going to give you specifically Federal Reserve notes. So it says without just compensation. We don't know specifically what that means because, once again, it's vague. But
yes.
We know what it didn't mean because Federal Reserve notes did not exist until 1913.
Correct.
And the Fifth Amendment and the Takings Clause was written in 1791, implemented. So here in 2020, if they take you and Claire's house via the eminent domain seizure, let's name for what it is, seizure process, you will be compensated with Federal Reserve notes, an instrument that also is subject to highly unconstitutional stuff. So you see what I'm saying? I mean, would that be a class action lawsuit right there? All these people that have been given Federal Reserve notes when the Fifth Amendment could not have been meaning Federal Reserve notes because they didn't exist. What do you think?
I'm not sure I'm following your logic on that particular one. I mean, I've been making the argument for quite some time that all of this spying on Americans through our computers and our computer network is a violation of the Fifth Amendment because they're using our RAM, our CPUs, our hard drives, our internet connection. They're taking it for so-called public use without any compensation at all to us end users.
Well, what I'm saying is that in a takings case, the government, the state, only offers you monetary fair market value. That's going to be Federal Reserve notes. They don't compensate you in gold. They don't compensate you with a mark on the tally stick. You don't get yak dung. You don't get wampum. You get Federal Reserve notes. They didn't exist at the time that Amendment 5 was written. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not sure I agree with that argument. I'm not sure I agree with that argument.
All right. How about this one? Nor shall private property be taken for public use. Public use. So the individual is the individual shall not have the private property be taken unless for public use. Public use. That's utilitarianism. Now, mind you, this says. For the greater constitutional protection for individual liberties. And now, right here in the middle of the Bill of Rights, protecting individual liberties, it says, you as an individual shall not have your property taken unless it's for public use. Utilitarianism is the doctrine that actions are right if they are useful or for the benefit of a majority. The doctrine that an action is right insofar as it promotes happiness, and that
Yeah,
the
this
greatest
has been
happiness is the
abused a
greatest
lot.
number.
This has been abused a lot. I've seen cases where private homes were taken by eminent domain and then turned over to developers. Anyway, Mitchell, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. I'm going to try and jam 3 phone calls into our last segment of our program today after we come back to these words from our sponsor. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program today here. We're going to back to the phones to Layla in Canada. Hello, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I was surprised that I haven't heard more comments about Kamala Harris. One gentleman who called earlier was criticizing Mike Pence for looking like a cadaver. Well, Mike Pence had absolutely no alternative. He did the only thing he could have done, because if he had actually been too aggressive in dealing with Kamala Harris, he would have been accused of being sexist as well as racist. However, Kamala Harris, when the camera was on her, especially in the first half of the so-called debate, was mugging. She had her eyebrows raised and she had this sneer, smug look on her face. And then when she did talk, she just behaved like a juvenile off the street. I was embarrassed. And I think that's one of the reasons our government, or the U.S. government, well, here in Canada as well, has deteriorated so badly. There was a time when men were conducting affairs that most of them conducted themselves in a restrained manner, much like the way Mike Pence did. Trump gets criticized for being too aggressive, and then when Pence is restrained and respectful, he's criticized. I don't understand how someone like Kamala Harris could reach the position that she's in, except that she got in every position because she was a woman and a, quote, woman of color. And if that's the way we're choosing leaders in any Western democracy, then it's no wonder that we've fallen to the level that we have. Again, go back and look at her facial expressions. They were juvenile, they were childish. It was like someone stealing a scene.
Yes.
The facial expressions were disgraceful, and she was wearing obviously her eyelids were heavy because she had on these false eyelashes and she kept blinking. But on top of that, it was the sneering smirk on her face that was
a lot of people complained about that. Yeah.
Has anyone complained?
Oh yeah, I got a lot of emails
I'm glad to hear
on
that.
it. Yeah.
That's good to hear. Now, let's hope that it reflects in the way, if the vote, whatever legitimate vote takes place, let's hope that reflects, because that's the woman. Should Joe Biden drop dead, we've got basically a juvenile delinquent off the streets who's been promoted because of her appearance, of her skin color, and her ethnic identity.
Yeah,
it's scary. It's absolutely scary. So anyway, and as for some of the comments that were made about other people calling in, it's true. Callers should not be condemning other callers. However, one of the problems is when you get into the fray, you've got to have thick skin.
That's true.
And yes, the problem falls on your shoulders, Mike. And I think you've got a lot to deal with. But yeah, some people should refrain from criticizing others. Deal with issues and facts.
All right. Well, Layla, I got to let you go. We're at the end of the program here. My apologies to the callers who did not get on the air. Just call in tomorrow. Of course, we're going to have the lovely Lady Claire in hour number 2. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's going to have Steve Elkins on in his hour number 2 with lots of good information to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We need your help to keep doing what we're doing. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.